Hello, my name is Jazz and welcome back to my channel. Today I am drawing a mermaid that is inspired by an anglerfish. I was inspired when I was watching the Our Planet Netflix nature documentary. I was very inspired specifically by the entire deep sea section with the bioluminescence, especially on the anglerfish, and the Lophelia coral. So I decided to draw a mermaid for MerMay based off those elements. I did actually stream the first couple days I was working on this piece, and it took me so long. The finished piece actually took me around 19 hours to complete, which is insane for me. I've never spent 19 hours straight on a piece before, and I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. So while there were some hiccups and bumps in the road, I think that most of the time spent on it was worth it. While on the topic of streaming, I would like to plug my Twitch. I stream, or at least I try to stream, at least once a week. The link for my Twitch will be in the description down below, or you can search me on Twitch, all that jazz with 2 Z's _. I stream a whole bunch of different things. I stream personal projects I'm working on, commissions, and even sneak peeks of new videos that I'm working on. So click the link in the description to give me a follow over there. I hope to see you at some of my live streams. I started lining with a fairly dark blue line art because I wanted the line art to be more cohesive with the final image and that the line art to blend a little bit in with the water surrounding it. I do have to go in later on and darken up the line art a bit because the water around it was becoming too dark. I spent a full hour just working on the hair alone, and it was so much fun. I actually really love how the hair looks. I enjoyed the process of drawing it. Learning how to draw hair underwater was very strange because it's not a way that you normally see hair. So in order to get some references for it, I actually looked at Eris from the Sinbad movie in 2002-ish. Her hair is very floaty, very similar to how it would move underwater. So that reference was a great help when figuring out how to position the hair in my illustration. I really wanted to make this mermaid look intimidating, like she's a predator, so I gave her long, sharp-ish nails and filled her mouth with as many teeth as I could. I had 3 or 4 layers of teeth that I stacked on top of one another, just so that I could make sure I was filling her mouth to the brim with teeth, really making her look like the apex predator she would be. At this point, I realized her tail was much too small to transport a creature of her size, as well as at the wrong angle. So I had to redraw the angle of the tail and make the fin much larger to transport her more easily. I also very specifically made sure it was the shape of an anglerfish tail, which are more like an upside down cone than something like a whale tail or something more flowy. One of the more difficult parts of the illustration was drawing the fins on her hips and her ears. I've never really drawn fish fins before, and the texture that they are is really interesting and unique. So I did my best to try and figure it out, but I think it's something I would definitely like to practice more. It took me quite a while to figure out how to position the ones on her hips. I had to think a little bit about where her antenna would be. Initially I placed it on sort of a raised bump on her forehead, like where it would be on an anglerfish, but her face was getting a little bit crowded. Someone in stream suggested I bury the antenna in her hair, which seemed like an elegant solution that worked out perfectly for me and the illustration. Figuring out how much detail to put into the background elements is always kind of difficult for me. I wasn't sure how much detail I wanted to put into the coral. I mostly populated that space with rocks, underwater kelp, and some squiggles to represent the entangling parts of the Lophelia coral that I was inspired by. Here I am going in over each of the line art elements with a clipping mask to color them darker so that they stand out more against the darkness of the ocean background. I wanted to make the color scheme very analogous or monochromatic, because underwater there wouldn't be a lot of variety in the color of how a creature looks. Many deep sea creatures are very pale or white or even see-through. I made her skin very pale because she wouldn't be seeing a lot of sun, and the other colors sort of a similar dark blue. Anything brighter would make her not as good a predator because she would be more easily seen. I also really wanted the bright, more saturated color of her antenna to really stand out against all of the more muted tones of her body. I wanted to make her eyes a very piercing and unsettling part of the illustration, so I ended up going in later on and coloring the line art so they look more milky and pale and stand out more from the rest of the elements. You see these really white, almost blank eyes in a lot of deep sea fish. I put a little extra thought into choosing the colors for the submarine. In real life, the body of the submarine would be a very bright yellow, but underwater, underneath all these layers of blue, the color would appear a bit more green than that bright yellow, so I chose my colors to reflect that. I shade the skin with a dark blue and blend it out with the wet blender. Unfortunately, the combination of these two colors goes a little bit gray, which becomes a problem later on when I'm doing a bunch of overlays, because that gray really sucks a lot of the life out of the other colors in the illustration, so I end up having to go back in later on and color balance this layer. My first pass at trying to color the hair didn't give me the effect I wanted, so I took a step back and tried a different approach, and I really like the way this looks better. I think it draws a lot of light into the illustration, and it's actually one of my favorite parts. And it was one of my favorite parts to do. I had a really great time working on it. One of the most important parts of this illustration to me was trying to make sure that enough light got into the drawing. I wanted the light to really appear like it was coming from her antenna and the tips of her tails, so every element of the illustration had to be shaded in a specific way that made sense with the lighting and that made everything look more dramatic / scary / exciting. When I started this illustration, I told myself I didn't want to draw every single scale on the tail. I end up drawing every single scale on the tail. I was hoping I would come up with something that would be a quicker, but also high quality solution. I didn't. I do like the way that this turned out though. Now that I know how to draw it, maybe it won't take me as much time, but while drawing it, I was getting some serious cramps in my hand from all the tiny little arch movements that I was having to do. The most difficult part of it was trying to figure out how the scales would curve around the body to make it appear as a three-dimensional object. The tail acted as a sort of area light, so it gave a diffusal of lighting over the entire body of the mermaid. I was happy about that, considering how much time and effort I put into making sure that different parts of the mermaid looked good, so the fact that there was some lighting on them was really helpful to me. I needed to make sure these light sources weren't competing, that the main light source was still the one on her antenna, but that they were consistent and that they were both represented. The anglerfish tail is semi-transparent, so I had to resolve this somehow. I ended up making the center of the tail, the middle portion, more transparent than the edges, so that the top part looked like it had more lighting on it, so it was more visible, and the part near the tail looked like it was more dense, where it was connected to the main part of the tail. I'm still not 100% happy with how I shaded the hip and ear fins, but I am more happy with where they ended up than where they began, which is all I can really hope for. I realized that I needed to add some more texture and somehow make it look like a thinner fabric with more folds than a sort of thicker one. It looked more like a piece of fabric than a fin before, and I think I resolved that a little bit. I do want to practice it more though, so maybe I'll draw some more fish in the future. The main light source is her antenna, but the tips of her tail are also giving off light, so I had to make sure that the bulbs looked like they were truly glowing, and I did that by using a sort of soft diffusal of the same color of that light on the tail fin. I also had to remember to backlight certain parts of her body, like her shoulder and her hair, where the light would be strong. Shading the submarine was actually a lot of fun too. I think it really looks like the light from the antenna is reflecting off of it. And I had a lot of fun shading the glass ball part of it. I think I did manage to achieve something that looks like a glassy texture, but I would love to practice this more because it was really interesting trying to get it to look transparent and round and with the glass material all at the same time. As mentioned, I colored in the line art around the eyes. It really makes them look more spooky and intimidating, and also more like this is a kind of animal that doesn't see a lot of light. The tail really came together when I colored the line art. It ended up looking very filmy, transparent, and exactly like how I wanted it to. It turned out amazing in my opinion. I also colored a lot of the other line art on the body and face to make the character look a little bit more painterly in 3D. The final pieces of the illustration really started to come together when I added some dark blue overlays that made the light really look like it was coming into the illustration and made the other parts look like they were surrounded with dark, murky water. I was having some minor issues with the shape of the back that I was trying to correct with overlays and shading. I color balanced the body shading layer and added another overlay, blended it out a little bit, and I think that resolved some of the issues with the shape of the body. I really love how the light coming off the submarine looks. I think it's well shaped. I think that the edges are nice and soft. I really think it looks like light moving through the water. I'm very proud of how that turned out. It looks great. I was trying to figure out a way to fill up some of this dark space surrounding them, so I ended up putting in a lot of these like little floating specks that would be catching the light from both her antenna and her tail. And I really like the way those filled the space. It feels natural, but not like I'm trying to add a lot of life to the deep sea where there wouldn't be a lot of it. And with that, the piece is pretty much done. I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. I think all the effort that went into it really produced a above average for me product, and I'm just really happy with it. My contribution to MerMay. If you'd like to see more videos from me, you can subscribe to see what I'm making in the future, and if you like this video, please leave a like. It'll let me know that you want to see more of this content. Links to my social media are in the description down below, as well as links to my Fiverr. I am currently open for commission, so if you'd like to get an illustration from me, please go commission me. I would love to work with you. Thanks again so much for watching, and have a wonderful day and all that jazz.